So it's been more than a couple of months since that random February Tuesday tweet that announced the Elden Ring's DLC. And during that time, I have been analyzing every theory and prediction I have come across, and I've been dissecting every conclusion that has been drawn in an attempt to find something concrete. First off, I'll be frank. Some theories out there are straightforward with good facts, and some they couldn't be more outlandish, like the ones suggesting the DLC might take place in the center of the lands between, where the divine towers intersect, the area that is covered by clouds. And I will tell you why that is very unlikely. So together, we'll venture deep down the rabbit hole and analyze everything the release picture has to offer. So let's get down to it. Let's begin with what's in the picture, because it's the only clue we've had. You might have noticed there are two trees instead of just one. One is straighter and leaking some amber colored sap, whereas another is crooked and spiraling around the straighter tree. It kind of resembles the trees that they put up in horror movies. The next thing you'll notice right away is the character who's riding horseback on Torrent. We'll have to assume it's Torrent because I haven't seen another horse like that. Additionally, the blonde-haired character on the horseback seems to be a girl or a woman young in age because the person is riding the horse saddled sideways. This is how women in dress rode horses back in the day instead of wearing pants. But of course there are men who also ride horse saddled sideways. There are even professional riders who do so. And there are competitions that are held just for side saddle riding. Okay, let's not go off on tangent here. The next thing you'll have to notice is the vast golden grassland covered in tall grass, much like prairies during autumn. And this is unlike anything we have yet to see in lands between. And scattered across the golden grassland are spectral tombs. And we do have some idea of what they might be, and you can actually see these ghastly tombs as far as the grassland extends. Scattered across the landscape are some ruined structures. You can see ruined arches, and there are a couple of stone tombs that you might notice, and all of these structures might hold some clue. The environment yet again gives us more things to ponder about. At the left side of the picture there's a blanket of fog enveloping the landscape, and towards the horizon you'll see a row of hills forming a straight line. The last but very important part of the landscape is the sky. And in Elden Ring, sky is like its own character, with each ending having a distinct sky of its own. And if you have traveled across the lands between, you'll know that you haven't seen a sky like that anywhere. Now, with all of those clues at hand, let's dive deep into the rabbit hole and uncover everything we can. The Erdtree is the most dominant part of scenery in Elden Ring, as it looms over us till the furthest corners of lands between. And unless we venture underground, the giant golden tree's rays of light reach us everywhere. In the picture, we can see two trees like we discussed earlier, and if you have seen the full resolution picture, you can zoom in and see a bunch of dark debris around the two trees. Meaning, what's happening in the picture might not be a passive event, it's something active. The two trees might be clashing, and it seems like the darker crooked tree is strangling Erdtree. As we can see, the Erdtree is oozing its amber colored sap. It sort of seems like it's bleeding, doesn't it? But let's not always trust the appearance right away, as in Elden Ring they can be deceiving. If you have ventured the deep underground of lands between and reached a location called Deep Root Depths, you'll find a remarkable sight to behold. Here, it seems there are roots of more than one trees. We can definitely see two, but there can be more. And if you have been actively rooting out the death roots by hunting the ones who live in death, then you'll see that those grisly looking roots infested with flies are spawning out of a great dark rotten tree whose roots are found deep underground in a giant arena where Prince Godwyn's cursed body rests. And in the arena itself, just opposite of the dark tree is another tree, lighter and still having the golden leaves. This could be Erdtree, as we can see similar golden leaves scattered around the royal capital Leyndell. But the Erdtree we observe above is one with a luminous glow, not like the one in Deep Root Depths with brown bark. Many theories out there suggest the luminous part of Erdtree is an illusory sign grafted over a pre-existing tree whose roots we find deep underground. Moreover, even before we burn the Erdtree and cover the royal capital in ashes, turning it into the Ashen capital, we can see that the capital is already covered in a bunch of ash. And why is that? The finger readers we meet, they tell us that burning the Erdtree is a sacrilege and it's not allowed. So what were they actually burning over there, that the capital is covered in ashes? The buildings we find inside royal capital, their doors and windows, are sealed by wax. so that the tiny particles won't enter. The tiny particles could only be as we see it scattered all around the capital. But what were they actually burning? And I can only think of two things that they could be burning. The first thing they might have been burning could be Erdtree itself, at least the top portion of the Erdtree, which is now replaced by the golden glowing illusory scion. And if the top portion of Erdtree somehow died, this might be the event that might have led to it. But if it's solely about the ashes we find scattered in the royal capital, there's another theory that seems more legible. The only logical thing they could be burning are the death root, because we don't find any death root inside the royal capital, even though the water outside and the crabs living there are infected with death. But inside the royal capital itself, the death root are nowhere to be seen, and I think there's only one way to effectively purge the death root, and that's by burning it. So unlike the golden glowing earth tree above ground, both the trees underground have wooden barks. Actually, even above the ground you can see the stem of earth tree that lead to the earth tree sanctuary are quite similar to the lighter tree that is underground. Also, the straight tree in the picture is leaking amber sap, just like how earth tree used to do in the past, and this is according to the item description of Blessed Dew Talisman, which says at one point Erdtree stopped giving out this golden amber sap. So something might have happened to it, right? Something might have changed. And this could be the event that changed it. The event that led Erdtree to be how it is now. A golden illusion, an object of mere fate. It seems to me that the Erdtree was the first thing to be grafted, so that the people of Lands Between still had the object they could worship and still could be controlled by the Golden Order. There is but one important revelation we can take out from the two trees, and it is the timeline. The event could have only happened in the past. The death root only grew after Godwin died, which means this happened after the Night of Black Knives. And when the death root spiraled around the Erdtree, the royal capital must have gone through quite a turmoil, an event enough to shake the foundations of Golden Order and their faith. Another thing we can see is the Erdtree was still blessing the lands with its golden sap. This could very well mean the event occurred even before the shattering of Elden Ring. We all know by now the rider on the Torrent is most likely Miquella. This can be easily proved by comparing the picture of the rider and the picture of Miquella when he was being taken by Mohg. There are three simple things you can take out as common between the two characters: the hair and how it's braided, the armband and the dress. Although we did say that the person looks like a young girl and Miquella was a boy. This is most likely because Miquella had a female self called Centrina, who was revered by the inhabitants of Lands Between. The proof is the Ferber Cookbook 3, which is described as being made by someone who devoted their life to Centrina and can only make one item, that is the Bewitching Branch, which again describes the power Miquella had over other beings, directly connecting Centrina and Miquella. Does this mean they were one person? No, but it strongly suggests that they were. You might have noticed we can get all sorts of Elden Ring except for Ranni's and Miquella's. Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, says Ranni discarded her sword, but Great Rune of Perpetual Abundance, as the community calls it, Miquella's Great Rune. We have no idea if it even exists. We do find Miquella in Morgwyn Palace, but he's unresponsive, and as of now we don't even know if Miquella still possesses a Great Rune. We can only take up Gideon Ofnir's words, as he suggests Miquella is one of the sword bearers when we ask him about unlocated demigods. But we also know that Gideon, even if he calls himself all-knowing, doesn't know it all. The another important being who's accompanying Miquella is Torrent, our mount. Ranni mentions something about Torrent's former master, and she could be talking about Miquella or maybe Centrina. The former master also owned 3 wolves as a companion. We see a trio of wolves in some very important places in Elden Ring. One is before Ranni's rise, as it is guarded by 3 lone wolves, and in Castle Soul, a castle devoted to protecting Miquella's secrets, there are 3 lone wolves guarding the intermediate part of the castle. Finally, we can find the statue of a child playing with 3 wolves in the arena where we fight Malekith. Although crumbling Farum Azula predates the present civilization in the Lands Between, the statue could have been erected later, although we know that the person who's riding Torrent is most probably Miquella or Centrina. One important question rises out of this, and that question is, what exactly is Torrent and Miquella or Centrina are doing in that location, and where is that location exactly? Now we come to the location, which is even more important to figure out if the DLC takes place there. So where could it be? And if you think it's in the middle of Lands Between over there, where it's covered by clouds, then let me tell you why I think you might be wrong. And I can do it in one word: perspective. Let me elaborate. the size of the Erdtree. Wherever you go, even if it's in the furthest corners of lands between, if you face towards the Erdtree, it looms over you, covering the major portion of sky. And if you were to be at the center, at that location, you would be at the foot of the Erdtree, pretty close to it, and it would look gigantic from there, not like how it looks in the picture. And during the beginning cutscene, there is a depiction of Erdtree from outside, and even there it is looming. Now in the picture, it does look quite small, meaning it must be quite far, right? Now this takes us to another question. Where outside the lands between then are Mikela and Torrent? Where is this land with golden grassland, as there is none like that all across the lands between? The only land we know of that is far out of lands between is where Tarnists were exiled to, where they never died and their souls never returned back to the Erdtree, as it was far away from its grace. And this does give us a clue to the next part. What are those spectral tombs that are all over the grasslands? We have seen tombs for dead bodies, tombs that are made up of rocks and stones, but these are spectral, quite similar to our spirit summons, aren't they? So my guess was maybe these are the tombs for souls rather than tombs for bodies, as we know that souls never went anywhere in the faraway lands where Tarnists were exiled to, and this does make a lot of sense. We see Tarnists like Gideon often dead and in tombs, but the game describes them as dead who yet live. This scene with swaths of dead body in some sort of necropolis in front of Marika's statue in the beginning. The narrator seems to describe all of these as Tarnists, and if he's not misleading us, the bodies of Tarnists who were dead but yet live was because their souls never rested, never returned to Erdtree, and were scattered all across the vast grassland, where they constantly warred in a land of struggles and turmoils, just like how Melina describes in Marika's words. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live and die. The land in the picture seems to be that land. Another thing we see in the grassland are the ruined structures. I've traveled all across the lands between. I went to Far Majula, I went to all of the underground regions, everywhere I could go, I went. But nowhere did I find the exact kind of ribbed arches as the ones shown in the image. Even the couple of tombs that are in the picture are ever so slightly different than ones found in lands between. I'll try to compare them one by one so you can see it, and you'll see that none will match. This might be a deliberate way to tell that the picture we are seeing is somewhere outside of lands between, making our theory that this most likely is the depiction of lands afar, where the Tarnist could have been banished to, more plausible. Next thing that holds a lot of clue is the environment. At least the rest of it. Do you remember what the narrator says in the beginning? The fallen leaves tell a story. The great Elden ring was shattered. In our home, across the fog, the lands between. Well, even if I don't sound like him, that's what he says. So we are most likely seeing a place across the fog, and the narrator also seems to be a Tarnist like us by the way he describes the beginning. He's most probably a leader of some sort. But who, it is not known. He could be the founder of the Round Table Hold. He could be some kind of ruler who rules the lands afar. But he seems to have the authority to beckon Tarnist from Horaloo to Goldmarks to us, a Tarnist of no renown. And he says, cross the fog to lands between, to stand before the Elden ring and become the Elden Lord. You can just ignore me. Regardless. The fog and the perspective of how the Erdtree looks, it again supports the point that the place shown in picture is far from lands between, wherever it is. We haven't run out of clues yet. We have one last clue we can dissect, and that is the sky itself. The color of the sky here does not match any ending. Let's compare. Nada. Nope. Can't be. Not in a million years. This dark tawny hue seems different than any sky we have seen across the lands between. So we know that we are for sure going to get a new place and a new location, but it suggests that we might also get a new ending. I mean, as a consolation, I hope we at least get a different time period where we can uncover the story more, I hope. So, in conclusion, let's gather everything we have learned till now, and we are drawing some very strong, important conclusions. The two trees and how they look seem to depict a time in past when Erdtree wasn't an illusory golden glowing tree and still look like a tree that gave out its amber sap. It also depicts a period of conflict between the two trees, most likely Codin's deathroot and the original Erdtree. The rider on Torrent is most likely Miquella. The story might even expand upon Godwyn and Miquella's close brotherly relationship, as they seem to have been quite fond of each other. Maybe Miquella was attempting to cure Godwyn's curse of death, just like he tried to cure Malenia's curse of scarlet rot. Torrent and Miquella are most likely in a land far away from Lands Between, where the Tarnis could have been exiled to. And if you remember, Torrent likes us and chooses us from the very beginning, and I guess maybe it's because we already met him before we came to Lands Between, and that meeting could have taken place in this land afar, the one that is shown in the picture, where we Tarnished constantly waged wars, just like how we do even after we return to Lands Between. It just seems war follows us everywhere, doesn't it? Furthermore, the whole land afar thing is also supported by the architecture, the tomb being different, and even further by the golden grassland we cannot find anywhere in the Lands Between. And the spectral tomb of souls could also mean the souls of dead here did not go back to Erdtree, as the land was beyond its influence. The fog we can see between the Erdtree and us also supports that it might be the land beyond the fog where we start our journey. Lastly, the color of the sky could mean we will get a new ending after completing the DLC content, and I can only hope it is more satisfying than all the current endings. But we know that From Software is not one for heartwarming, satisfying endings, so we can only hope. That's all for today. I'll see y'all later.